Greetings everyone, Brett here with Hammerhead Model Making, back with a sort of full build video. I say sort of because unfortunately with this build I ended up losing and or corrupting about 80% of the footage that I filmed. And I'm really disappointed by that because this is a challenging kit and I filmed a lot of stuff that I think could have been helpful for people building this kit. And a lot of the footage that I lost was of the construction. So I apologize. This video is going to be comprised of a lot of pictures that I took during the build process and then a little bit more video towards the end. And so I hope you'll enjoy what I do have, and I apologize that it did not quite work out how I wanted. But anyways, let's get on to the build. So, as is common with most aircraft builds, we start in the cockpit. There was quite a few parts that needed to be built up, assembled into sub-assemblies, some photo etch that needed to be added in order to get this ready for painting. This is a somewhat interesting cockpit, as it appears at first that it might be roomy, but it's actually quite a cramped cockpit. The fuselage of the Bf110 is quite narrow, and they managed to cram a lot of equipment in here. Now, the Eduard Profi Pack does come with pre-colored photo etch, as well as some uncolored photo etch as well for various parts, and they are quite nice. There are a number of upgrades you can get for this kit in the variety of like cast resin and 3D printed parts, but honestly I found out of the box everything is pretty satisfactory. You can see here I just painted up pretty much the same as I've painted the last few German aircraft I've made using the Vallejo aircraft set for German aircraft. The gun bay is, you have the ability to display it in the open position, which I chose to do here. And that kind of rounds off the actual cockpit. So moving on to the fuselage, there are a number of areas on this kit that have really poor fit. And mainly it's the engine nacelles to the wing fit, and then getting the wings to mate to the fuselage. And I apologize, I did a lot of sanding and filling and rescribing here in order to get those parts to look pretty good. And I apologize I don't have that footage. I also ended up buying some resin. This is Brazen, the Eduard stuff, resin exhaust, because the kit parts were just going to be overly complicated to try and put together for not that nice of a look. I also got some Brazen wheels here, which are a huge improvement over the kit parts and have a lot of very nice sharp detail. You just have to worry about, removing them from the casting block, but it's fairly straightforward to do that and get that casting plug cleaned up and the few little lines that are on there. And then I used this large file to kind of flatten the bottom of the tire where the aircraft would sit and it would naturally flatten out and bulge out. And this is something that I'm definitely being more conscious of as I'm building, is to making sure I'm getting that nice little flat part. There are a few photo etch parts you need to do for the exhaust. Otherwise, they go together pretty well. Now, this being a night fighter, you have to put the radar dipoles on the front of the aircraft. And as I was flipping through the paint schemes, I actually didn't realize that there was different versions of the radar set that goes on the front. And of course, the paint scheme that I really liked had the more complicated assembly. And unfortunately, there's really like no positive marks on the aircraft or pins or anything to tell you where these parts are all supposed to glue on. And unfortunately, I didn't get things quite as square as I was hoping to. If you look at pictures of this aircraft, the radar dipoles should be relatively square compared to each other. Mine kind of ended up canted out at the top a little bit. I have to live with it. I could have spent hours trying to fiddle with it and get it perfect, but it kind of would have made me crazy trying to do that. So close enough is good enough in this case. Here you can see the Brazen wheels, press fit onto the landing gear struts, and they look really good. Very pleased with them, and happy with how they turned out. Here you can kind of see a little bit of getting the radar dipoles on there, and a lot of the areas where I kind of had to sand and rescribe and fill. And there's another view of it. So these parts were comprised of 6 different parts, I think, plus eventually you'll have to put on the littler antennas on there. But here you can see I'm getting everything ready for primer and paint. I mean, once you get past the difficult areas of like filling and blending in the wings and the engine nacelles, the rest of the build actually goes quite nicely. And for the most part, all the rest of the parts fit. It's just some of these larger fuselage parts that don't quite fit. Now, this is one of Eduard's older toolings, from quite a while ago. So there's obviously a lot that they've learned since then in designing and tooling their kits, but it's still buildable. Now, I did a black primer undercoat, did a little bit of mottling with white, and now I'm laying down the main colors. This particular aircraft flew in Norway, I believe, or based out of Norway, and I kind of like the paint scheme because it was pretty straightforward. It's basically just the two colors. But on the underside, it had one black wing. I just thought that was such a neat look and very unique for this aircraft. That this is the one that I went with. Now, I do plan on building this into a larger diorama, and so I'm hoping that I can make up for the lack of footage in this video with a pretty extensive diorama video in the future. And even though the setting that I'm going to be putting this aircraft into may not be like 100% historical, I think it'll be a good representation of the German night fighters during winter. So that's kind of my end goal. So one of the things that I was conscious of while I was building this was how I wanted it to look in a snowy setting, and that kind of helped inform like a lot of the weathering that I did and kind of the overall tone of the aircraft. And so definitely something that I'm really excited to work on in the future. One of the things that in my mind, so I built this before the end of last year of 2025, and I was hoping that we would get some snow here in Utah, that I could build the diorama, take it out, and do some cool forced perspective pictures with a snowy backdrop. And it is, at the time of the recording this, it is now nearly the end of January, and we've literally had no snow in Utah, which is just super unusual. And so probably a good thing that I hadn't built the diorama yet. There's still parts that I'm collecting for it, and I'm if I can pull off the vision that's in my brain, it'll be a large diorama. I'm hoping it'll be pretty cool. So regarding the decals, and I apologize, I kind of had to gloss over the paint job because I really had very little footage that I was able to recover of that. But these are Eduard's older decals. They're not the new ones with like the thicker carrier film that you're supposed to be able to peel. And so using this Tamiya decal adhesive, which is a fairly new product to me, I was able to get these decals on them, and I love the old Eduard decals, and these ones were no exceptions. They worked flawlessly. And what's nice about this decal adhesive is it's also like a mild setting solution, so it also helps. Not only does it your decals adhere to the surface, but like conforms them down. So for the weathering, we're doing my normal process here. We've got our dark brown wash that we're going to apply everywhere. There's a lot of nice rivet detail on this kit, not a lot of nice recessed panel lines and things. So we're going to go over the whole aircraft with our wash here, and then once it dries, we wipe it off with a dry paper towel. The only difference here is on the black underside wing. I'm not going to use this dark wash because it wouldn't show up. Instead, I end up mixing a kind of like a medium gray oil wash and apply that instead. And the reason why I don't use, like, I've used other washes from Ammo MIG, including some like light gray dust type washes, and they just don't work as well as this dark brown wash does. So that's why I ended up using a oil wash here, which pretty much functions the same way as the enamel wash. You apply down over a nice gloss coat, let it dry for a little bit, and then you can wipe away the excess, and there you go. And again, any areas that are stubborn that the wash doesn't really want to wipe away, then you can hit it with a little bit of like odorless mineral spirits, and it'll vanish right away. But I do like this like medium gray wash because it's not super strong, it's not cartoony, but still enough of a contrast to, to show the panel lines and to show the detail down there. So I was quite pleased with the mixture I got on that. I wish I could tell you what my ratios were, but it was just I mixed black and white with a little bit of tiny bit of brown until I was happy with it. The black wash is also put on like the wheels, the tires, the spinners, anywhere that had that black color. So now I'm moving on to the exhaust, and you can see here I've temporarily fit the exhaust stacks on so that I can mark down where I start painting the actual exhaust. Now, this particular Night Fighter version had these very large, like flame dampening exhausts put on to obviously help it at night, so that the glowing exhaust couldn't be seen. Interestingly enough, one of the exhausts actually goes down underneath the wing instead of over the wing. I believe it's because there's that air intake right there that would be blocking it. I'm not sure why it's not on the other engine like that, but nevertheless, it does offer a unique look. And so for painting the actual exhaust, I am using this Mr. Color Clear Brown. This is really heavily thinned. I would say like 90% thinner, which allows me to really slowly build up layers and opacity until I'm really happy with it, and allow me a nice like blended feathered edge. And basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to concentrate more like right where the exhaust comes out, and then feather it out as a little bit as it goes back down the wing, and give it that unique look. Now, the Germans were using a lower grade fuel than, like, let's say the Allies, so you're going to see less of that like high lead gray staining, and it's going to be more like a dirty, dark, sooty staining. And so the next step now is to use some clear black. And so this is going to be concentrated mainly like really heavily at the point the exhaust comes out, and kind of down the center of the exhaust streak here, just to kind of help add a little bit more depth and richness to that exhaust staining. I also did the underside as well using the same colors. However, against the black paint, it doesn't show up as well on camera. So now with that portion of the weathering done, we can go ahead and give everything a nice satin coat. So this is going to knock down the sheen, but still have a little bit of shine to it, and allow a little bit of light to kick, along contours, edges, corners, and things like that, and still give it that look of like, this is metal that's painted. It just naturally has that a little bit of a sheen to it. And then what I'm going to end up doing afterwards is taking flat clear coat and kind of spots painting areas in like this ultra matte. So for example, like the areas where the exhausts are. And what's kind of fun about this is it allows you to play with these different textures where, depending on how you're looking at it and how the light is bouncing off the model, you'll get areas that have some shine to it, and you'll get areas that are just like dead flat and won't give you any shine. And it just kind of helps create a little bit of like visual variety on the model, especially if you have it like in the display case, and you're viewing it from different angles. It looks interesting and creates this nice texture. So going over the areas of the exhaust, including the area underside, want to try and match this kind of the sooty nature of this exhaust coming out even on the underside, even though it's not as visible. And then we're going to hit other things like the wheels, the propellers, the other things that would necessarily have a slightly more dull finish. Another portion that I wasn't able to recover a lot of video of was the oil weathering. You can see here there's oil weathering already on the wing, at the wing root. I wanted to show like if this was being operated in the winter, and you get your ground crew getting up there and putting fuel in the aircraft, the pilots are getting up there, getting into the aircraft, they're walking on the wet, cold, snowy, muddy ground, they're going to be tracting a lot of dirt. So that's kind of what I was trying to go for here, is this kind of attracting that a lot of mud and dirt and grime and whatnot onto the aircraft there. So I'm going to use the same painting process that I used on ye old pub, the B-17, for painting the exhaust. And I've really come to like this process because, one, it's super simple and easy to do, but I love the results. And so basically what I'm using this color called Parasite Brown by Vallejo, and then Leather Brown by Vallejo. And I'm really getting the paint thin here, like almost translucent. And I'm just gonna smother the exhaust stack with this color. Now this color goes on quite bright, but it does darken down a little bit as it dries, but it still has this like a great rusty color to it. So we're gonna apply this just all over. We're not being careful, we're not being neat. Make sure to get inside the exhaust as well. And don't miss any. I mean, you can miss part. That's kind of the whole point of this, is to be random. So now we're going to do the same thing with the Leather Brown, and I'm applying it over the Parasite Brown while it's still wet. I want these two colors mixing and becoming splotchy, and having some where there's more Parasite Brown, some where there's more Leather Brown. I want them both showing through. And so this is kind of like the first step. Now you let those two browns dry. You want them nice and dry, and then we're going to apply the dark brown wash. And you can apply this kind of in a patchy fashion, or you can just really flood it on there. Either way works just fine, at least in my experimenting so far. But get it on where you want it, and to the extent and coverage that you want it, and wait for it to dry. Once it's dry, and just, I didn't clarify this, but you want to apply the enamel wash directly over the Vallejo paint. No kind of clear coat in between it. So then you can start wiping away the enamel wash. And what that's actually going to do is it's going to, like, you might have areas where you're wiping away just the enamel wash. You might have areas where you're wiping away a little bit of the underlying acrylic paint, and so you're going to get these like awesome random bits where it's like nice shiny bare metal. You're going to get areas where it's this Parasite Brown or the Leather Brown. You're just going to get these great looking tonal variations between all the different things that we just painted down, and it dries super dead flat, and I think looks like a good used heat stained exhaust. You could then go on and do like a clear matte coat over it. I choose not to, just because I still want some of that like underlying metallic paint to kind of show through and to shine through, to contrast the flat nature of the paints that we put on above it. But anyways, I'm really pleased with how this looks, and this is kind of my new go-to for painting, nice dirty weathered exhaust. So next up is another weathering step that I'm doing. I've done this before, but I'm doing a little bit more heavy on this one again because of that winter nature, and that's going to be doing some. Essentially, I'm taking the normal dark brown and normal black oil paints that I use for my weathering, and I'm diluting them really heavily, and this will allow me. So I mean, this is more than like wash thin, but I'm going to load up a large round brush here, and essentially like start flicking this really thinned oil paint all over it, and my goal here is to kind of simulate like mud splattering up underneath the aircraft. You're going to have the wheels there, they're going to kick up mud. You're going to have the prop wash kicking up mud, and like half melted snow and whatever might be on the ground, and create these great looking just random splotches on the underside of the aircraft. And if you find you have areas that are maybe like a little bit, like the drops are a little bit too big or uniform, you can either take like a paper towel, or I'm using a sponge here, and start blotting some of those areas that you may not necessarily be super happy about. And it'll kind of help blend them in. It'll still add some nice like variety to it without necessarily looking like just a giant round blob, which doesn't look super realistic at this scale. So this is something I have, and you can do it in different layers too. So like, do a couple layers down, let it dry, do another couple layers, and it looks really, really neat in my opinion. So at this point, we can start putting everything together, all the little sub-assemblies that we've done, all the little detailed parts that we've done, and get this thing wrapped up. The I do recommend if you're getting this kit, make sure you're getting the Profi Pack kit because it does come with canopy masks. This is an aircraft that absolutely needs them because it's just got a lot of window panes that would be a pain to mask on your own manually. But it was really fun removing all the masks and finally seeing like the full cockpit in detail with the rest of the aircraft, seeing the gun bay, all that kind of stuff. Like it's really exciting. So getting the exhaust installed, I'm just using super glue for all of this. Just get these, and they fit flawlessly. It's really easy and look really, really cool, especially with that exhaust streaking on there. The the next bit is getting the landing gear. This is another area where the kit just is not great. There's no real like positive, slot or hole that the landing gear sits into. You just kind of have to like get it onto these little shelf pieces and fiddle around with the alignment to get it to work right. And it's kind of a pain, but it's buildable, just it can be frustrating. But at this point, like I'm getting the wheels on and now I have to set it down to make sure that it's level and the flat spots are sitting level on the table. There's a lot of little tiny antenna bits that need to go on. The kit offers you this round antenna as a plastic part, but it doesn't look very good. So I ended up taking just a small piece of wire, wrapping it around the end of a paintbrush to get that nice rounded shape, and then gluing it on there. Right now I'm drilling the hole for one of the antenna wire and getting the rear gun installed. I debated on what was going to be the best approach for this, whether either to glue it in ahead of time and try and mask around it, or install it like I am now after the fact. It was kind of a pain to do it this way, but in the end I think it's easier this way than trying to install it early in the build and then mask around it and paint around it and paint under it. I think this just ended up working out better. Either way, it's kind of a pain. So while some other parts are drying, we're going to go ahead and start working on the navigation light. So I'm just laying down a foundation of like a high chrome paint color. And then we're moving on to some more photo etch for the rear gun sight. Interestingly, the instructions have you put like this. It's basically like a ring and bead sight. So there's two guns here, and you put one of these on each side of the gun. So each barrel gets its own ring and bead sight. That seems a little weird to me, but I wasn't able to verify if that was normal or true or not. So I just followed the instructions. Maybe sound off down below if you know what that's about. I just think it's interesting. Landing gear doors going on. Again, this is just kind of like a butt joint. Like there's no tabs, there's no locating pins. It's just you just glue one side of the landing gear door onto the side of the engine nacelle, and that's it. Yeah. This, like I said, this kit can be a challenge. Getting the drop tanks installed. The instructions don't necessarily specify if this particular aircraft used drop tanks. I'm kind of taking artistic license here. I think it looks interesting to have the drop tanks on there, so that's why they're going on there. Next up, we're going to be doing the radio antenna using some Easy Line. So we just secure this on with CA glue. And essentially what I'm doing is like dipping the very end of the Easy Line into some accelerant. So as soon as it touches the glue, it pretty much cures instantly, which makes it a little bit easier to work with this material, because there's nothing frustrating than like stretching out your wire, getting it to the glue, holding it there, and then you release your tweezers or whatever, and it just pops out because the glue didn't have a time to set. That's annoying. So using like an accelerant or a zip kicker or whatever you call it is pretty handy in this situation. So getting this antenna glued on, off camera, I ended up clipping off the excess, but there's kind of the finished result there. I saw pictures where these would have two antennae, one going to each vertical stabilizer. I saw pictures where there was only one antenna going to one vertical stabilizer. I couldn't find anything specific to this particular aircraft that was like definitive. It had one or two. So because I have a preference for asymmetrical things, the uh, the obvious choice for me was to do just one radio antenna. But I've seen pictures where they've had both, and I can't necessarily tell you why one has two, one has one. That's just what I noticed in reference pictures. Finally, we can get all of the rest of the clear parts installed. And again, like other parts on this kit, 0 locating tabs, 0 placement guide. It's just kind of you have to hope you're getting in the right place and in the right orientation. From what I understand from other people who have built this kit, who have tried to build it with all the canopies closed, it's really not designed for a closed canopy, which is a shame, because the 110 actually has pretty decent lines when all the canopies are closed, but it can be done. It just requires a lot of work. So this kind of wraps up the build. Again, I apologize that this wasn't the best way to present this particular build, and I'm disappointed. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that I wanted to show you about building this particular kit. Nevertheless, I am glad that I was able to recover some footage, and that I had some pictures available. But thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I appreciate it. Thank you for watching. And stay tuned, because, like I mentioned, I will have essentially a part 2 to this, where I build a large winter Luftwaffe diorama. I would like to give a huge shout out to my patrons for helping support this channel. If you have an interest in supporting my work and this channel, I leave a link down below to my Patreon. I recommend checking it out. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, and you like the video, you like what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing. That's the more people I get subscribing, the more people I get watching the videos, just helps get the reach out there and allows me to kind of perpetually continue working on Hammerhead model making. Huge shout out to everybody who has subscribed at this point. We're really close to 50,000 subscribers, which is really exciting. I know it's not like a big technical YouTube milestone, but for me, like personally, it's a huge milestone. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Head on over to my Instagram if you want to see what I'm working on the workbench right now, and check out my Patreon. We'll see you on the next video. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.